What's happening,
How
man?
are you, buddy?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, good to see you.
So what's going on?
Oh, man. That's,
Oh, you guys saw some Rush concerts, huh,
yeah, we
buddy?
did. It was, I kind of treated the whole experience like on the subject of reparenting, like
Yeah.
I was really viewing the whole thing as like I'm taking these young parts of myself to these shows. Like I'm going to give them
Yeah. Yeah.
the best experience I can possibly give them. And it
It's
was really
awesome.
cool from that standpoint. It was cool, for my brother and I, music was such a lifesaver, and it wasn't just having music to listen to. It was the experience of getting the tickets,
Mhm.
going to the shows, being in the live venue,
Oh yeah.
and it was a constant thing to look forward to because
Yeah.
that was back when these guys were cutting an album every year. They
Yeah.
were on tour nonstop, and we were in Columbus, Ohio, so we could go to like Cincinnati, Toledo,
Mhm.
Cleveland.
Mhm.
We had so many venues around us, and
I've
that's
been
what
to
we
see
did, man.
shows in Cleveland and Cincinnati and Columbus. I used to follow Fish around. So
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, you know all those venues, right?
oh
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was like, that combined with the zero adult supervision was, it
Oh
was
yeah.
like it was awesome. I mean, we went to, lots and lots of other bands besides Rush, but Rush was that was our kind of like holy grail. Like, man, this is,
It's
so
awesome.
I got these tickets a while ago, and I was just like, man, I just kind of grabbed whatever tickets I could get to whatever shows I could get. And then I was like, yeah, we'll probably end up selling some of them or whatever. And we had tickets to 3 shows. I was like, let's just go to all three
Yeah.
and do it
Yeah.
up. And
Yeah.
it was, I mean,
And
I'm
so
so
what,
glad
like
we
somebody
did.
recognized your brother?
Oh, dude, it was like 50 people every
Yeah.
night at
Yeah.
least. I mean, but
Yeah.
but yeah, there were some people who were kind of with the band that were touring and doing different stuff that recognized him, and
That is
everybody
awesome.
from like fans to the guy selling popcorn, it was wild to experience
Yeah,
that.
yeah, your
But it
brother's
was,
famous. Yeah, it's
yeah, it
funny.
was cool. I mean, the thing that was cool for me was, it wasn't just like people saying, "Hey, man, I know you," kind of thing. It was people who were like, there was an earnestness about it. Like,
Yeah,
don't stop what you're doing. You are giving us a lifeline, and we really need
yeah,
that. And don't, it's important. So there was a real kind of validation to it
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's awesome.
that
It's
was really
really, I
nice.
mean, you're,
Yeah.
your brother is inspiring. I mean, I
Yeah,
know, like, he probably doesn't think that, but it's like I know how hard it is to get up and talk this shit and for him to kind of
yeah.
keep going is, it's just, I kind of think of him like a like an older brother, weird way.
Oh man, he would love to hear that. I'll tell him that. But I kind of see you guys as very similar in that you both have
Yeah.
this ability to just kind of turn on the camera
I feel
and
like I'm losing
flow.
it, man. Like I'm trying to get back to it. Like I'm trying to like focus and read again. Like just focus on
Yeah.
what. Like I feel like it's become like I've expended too much, And like I
Yeah.
know your brother has stuff he reads, but I feel like I'm not like old Facebook, where you'd get
Yeah.
the Atlantic and all this. Like I feel like there's like a gap in my like information delivery, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like when you're just consuming other content, it's not really the same as like so I'm trying to like buckle back down and dedicate a little time to just like giving myself some space to read again, like
Yeah.
and to
It's
kind
it's
of
so
like,
important.
yeah,
Whatever it is that you need, it's like I know for him, the mental health part of it is always a challenge. And then,
yeah.
you get on there and you say the wrong word and people attack you. And that's another challenge on top of it. And,
Yeah. Well, I think he, like me, understands, like, because the followers don't like it when we kind of deal with like a troll or somebody and talk shit back to them. But what they don't understand is that, like, there's this energy debt that comes at us, right? Where we get all this negative energy and you almost have to like
yeah,
express a little bit back so that we're not,
yep,
I mean, one thing I've realized with followers a lot of times is they don't put a lot of thought into like what it might be like on the other side of the camera to deal with it's not natural to deal with this much direct interaction,
No,
coming back at us.
no, it's complete overwhelm,
Yeah,
and
it
you're
is.
right about that. Like, I used to kind of get on him, like, stop paying so much attention to the trolls. But then I realized he has to do that. It's like, it's almost like if you're being in an abusive relationship and you're not speaking your side or
Right,
expressing your
right.
feelings, then it's got to go somewhere, and it comes out.
Right. And
So
so for him and for me, for people that respond to comments, we're reading the comments, right? So I mean, we're
right,
some people just say, I don't read the comments, and then okay, yeah, but
right.
it's like once you read, so it's hard to remain like unaffected, with
Oh,
people just like fucking
dude.
picking everything apart.
I mean, I wasn't even like involved at all in the beginning, and I would see the comments and I couldn't take it. Like, it's not even
Yeah.
about me. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, dude, I don't know how you can do this, but I mean, I've kind of, gotten used to it to a point. But, when there's times when you're like, oh, these people are really deeply not understanding
Yeah.
who he is, and then making comments from that place, it can be tough, man. I
Yeah.
mean, I think
Yeah.
it's harder for me now than it is for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know,
Yeah,
I
it's
empathize.
like a psychological. I mean, I think when I started doing it, like what I was doing, like just like sharing people would say, "Isn't this bad for your mental health?" I say, "No, it's good for my mental health." But over
Yeah,
time, it shifts, and it's like, I don't know.
yeah,
My girlfriend
yeah,
is trying to like sign me up for all these like brand possible deals or some shit, and it's like,
yeah.
it's kind of like a nightmare for me because
Yeah,
like,
we've never done that. I get those emails all the time, and I'm just like, I can't.
yeah,
I
I
don't know. I
don't
just
really
can't
want
do it,
to.
and it's it just feels so inauthentic. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like
yeah. It's like,
how,
yeah,
especially
she
coming
wants
from
to
my
move to
brother.
Mexico, so it's like this is like a way,
uh,
like, so I'm not fucking. I'm just like, do what you want, but don't end up resenting me when like I approach things from my own like like me,
exactly.
so it's like do these things, but like understand like my mind works very differently than yours.
Yeah, it might not go well.
No, no,
Totally.
no,
Yeah,
no.
that's funny, man.
So,
Um,
you were saying you want to talk about like disordered politicians, basically,
well,
or
I mean, I don't, that was a couple weeks ago. what do you want to talk about?
I
I'm
don't know.
completely
I
open. To me,
listened
this
to
is
like
just a
the
conversation,
Diary of a CEO podcast with JD Vance the other day, or like
Oh, wow.
as much as I could stand of it. My
That
girl
sounds like a
listens to weird
workshop.
podcasts. Like, yeah, but it was like fascinating because like in this weird way, like he's this weird, like, I mean, it's the dark side of the American success story, but like but then he's disordered. Like, if you knew nothing about the guy, you
Yeah,
knew nothing about
deeply.
reality, you'd think like, oh, this guy's really smart and what he's talking. But you see, like,
Yeah,
just the way he's it was like
yeah,
a masterclass in normalizing these fascists, basically, because
yeah.
the
He
guy
is
like pushed
really,
back a little, but not nearly enough.
yeah. I mean, I don't think it would be hard to push back on him just using his own words from the past,
Right,
but
right,
he is so kind of smarmy and slick, just
yeah.
like so good at that. And but I don't think it works as well as he thinks it does, at least to somebody
No,
with a sense of
I
you know,
I get the
perception.
idea. There's just no core self with him. It's just whatever
Yeah.
he shifts into whatever room he's in, he
Yep.
gives them what they want to hear, and he's really
Yep.
good at it. But
He is. Yeah. I thought I saw a couple clips from him on The View, and it was just like, wild to like watch him try to pretend that, the administration is, well, not racist at all. We're
yeah,
inclusive of black
yeah,
and brown
yeah.
people. And it's like, dude, you're talking to the wrong crowd here. Kind of like with Trump, you're like, does he really believe this, or is this,
I don't think he
it's like,
believes
I mean,
anything.
I don't think he believes anything. I think that's right. I think he believes what he interprets someone wants to hear, and he knows how to spin that, you
Well,
know.
when he explains his childhood and his traumas, he has an understanding of it, but he doesn't have like he's like manifesting exactly what it would do if you haven't really worked on it, which is just
Right.
have no, have no identity, have no
Yeah.
core self.
Yeah.
But
It's
I
disintegrated,
was kind
right?
of fascinated by it, to be honest, because like I was
Yeah.
just like, wow, like he had some like, I mean, I know it was just talking, but he had some insight into kind of, it was just, it was, all bullshit essentially, but like,
Right. But he's not
you,
stupid.
but he's not stupid at all,
Yeah.
no, and I
Yeah.
mean, he was using psychological terms, he was making a critique on therapy that I thought was fair, it was just interesting, which is
Yeah.
part of the problem, I think, is that, like, people
Right.
don't you watch what these people say, and then you look at what they do, and you figure out, they're full of shit, but
Yeah,
yeah, we
and then you find yourself sort of agreeing with them on some like, yeah,
yeah,
whoa,
yeah,
man,
yeah.
what's what's
I mean,
happening
I've been
here?
trying to listen to more of the like Sean Ryan, and like my girlfriend has weird
Mm.
podcast tastes, and like I just want to kind of see what they're saying,
Yeah,
but like you can see, you can see like how people fall down these rabbit holes, and kind of
yeah,
end up, you know, kind of thinking the wrong
yeah, and
things.
then some of them start to kind of wake up a little bit, like, wait, man,
Mhm.
this doesn't make sense in the
Yeah,
framework I've been living in,
yeah,
and then they
yeah,
kind of react to that. But
yeah,
yeah, you mentioned I've been thinking a lot, and I know you've been talking a lot about just the psychology of the billionaire with Elon and his
yeah,
being the first trillionaire and all this stuff. But like I think you mentioned in a video that like how they kind of escape the mental illness stigma. They're
yeah,
basically hoarders, but hoarders of money
yeah,
and
yeah,
power. And if they were doing that, there's a house not far from me where a hoarder lives, and you walk by and you can just see there's some deep dysfunction going on here. But since they're doing it with money and power and yachts and stuff, we're like, oh, that's success.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
they're geniuses,
yeah.
or whatever. I think you say capitalism is political narcissism or
Well,
fascism.
it's like
It's a
economic. I mean, I think capitalism
yeah,
extends far beyond just like an economic system. I think it creates like a mindset that we live in that reduces everything to kind of competition, consumption, and value
yeah,
to the system itself, right? And so,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
I
I
mean,
think all
I
these
get
things work in
sucked
tandem.
into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm conditioned for it, and
yeah. It's like an energy, you touch that energy and you fall into that trap of like, I mean, when
yeah,
I first started doing this, I had no money. I was on food stamps, and I felt free. And I was like
right,
kind of like not romanticizing my poverty, but really like understanding what it is to live outside of these kind of thought patterns. But then
right,
once money starts getting involved, it like puts you into this other mindset, and you start to want. I think the problem is always
yeah,
the wanting, right? I mean, I think of that with like consumerism, like, I choose to like participate in my own way by books, basically. Like we're
right,
collectors as humans, like we live in this
right,
society. So it's not like total abstinence, but it's like you think about ordering something and the kind of dopamine and anticipation of getting it, and how much do you value it when you get it, and how
right,
quickly are you then just moving on to ordering the next thing. I mean,
right,
and I think that's where capitalism, I mean, it begins with kind of scarcity mentality, but then once your kind of basic needs are taken care of, it's like, well, I want a nicer house, or I want,
right.
a better car, or whatever,
Yeah, the scale.
whatever it is, but it just never ends. I mean, I think the big lesson of the billionaires, outside of the fact that they're mentally ill, is that you can't really win, right? Like
No,
you
you're
can have
cooked.
none of them have been like, I have enough money and I'm done.
No,
I'm done. I'm going to start giving my money away.
yeah,
They
because
all
you don't
want
even
more, more,
notice it
more.
anymore. They're just
No,
like, I don't, Elon Musk doesn't notice the difference in his wealth
no,
from
no, it's
before the
not. I mean,
SpaceX
what do they
IPO
say?
to
It's
now.
like after like 10 million, very little changes other than like the
Yeah,
size and scope of things. But like
yeah,
your kind of like standard of life or happiness after 10 million, and I would think
yeah.
that's even probably pretty high. But like,
It's probably high. I mean, it depends on where you live, of course, but I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I did a short video the other day talking about this. They did that study at Boston College where they asked families of net worth of over 25 million if they felt financially secure, and almost all of them said no. And then they said, well, how much more would you need to feel secure? And they said it averaged out to be about 25%.
Yeah, but it's also that's to me that's more a statement of like you're living according to your standard of wealth, and so unless
Right.
this is where my dad is he has a lot of faults, but he's not a spender. Like his money
Mm.
almost embarrassed him, and so he would always preach like living within your means, right? That it's not
Ah,
really about how
interesting.
much you have, but it's about whether you're living within your means, right? And
Mm.
so I think with a lot of those people, yeah, they have a lot of money, but I forget who said it, but I also spend a lot of money,
Right. They
and
might all
so
be, they're so leveraged, some of them. Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. I mean, I
yeah,
just
for sure.
started getting credit cards like last year. I mean, financial abuse is a huge part of my story. Where like when I went to college, I wasn't ready to go, and I've never really been financially independent. But my parents argued over whether I should have a credit card and determined that like I would be spoiled if I had a credit card. So I developed this like fear of like debt, and so it's like I'm just starting for
Mm.
the last couple years of building my credit. Now, to my credit, I also didn't like get a bunch of credit cards and like max them out and bury
Right.
myself in debt. But
Ruin
it's like,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like this, like, I feel like a financial child a lot of times.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Cause that's kind of how it starts, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
start by getting a bank account and a credit card and
Yeah.
establishing
Yeah.
yourself in terms of capitalism,
Yeah. Yeah.
and who
Yeah. I
you
mean, where
are.
I
And
come from, kids were getting their credit cards at 16 or whenever they could, so
yeah.
because their parents, not some of them were spoiled, but it was more about an acknowledgement of the kind of financial reality that we live in, where credit is a fundamental part
Right.
of doing anything really. But
Right. Right. And that, yeah, not to shift gears too much, but and speaking of your dad, I'm curious how Father's Day was for you yesterday.
Father's, I don't think too much about him. I called my stepdad, who I reconnected with, who has dementia I hadn't seen in 10
Mm.
years. And so
Oh, cool.
that was really actually quite healing. It was kind of intense because I had to, he had a fall and got hit by a car or something and like had a
Mm.
surgery on his brain. And the wound got infected. So I had to take him to the hospital and he ended up being there for a week.
Mm.
But yesterday I just called him. I didn't really think about my dad too much. I think I'm thinking about him more today.
Mm.
When I think of him now, it's kind of weird because like I've almost forgotten, like it was such a challenge to define the abuse and kind of like share the experience. But as time's gone on and the anger kind of subsides and my memory of him fades, I find myself almost idealizing him again and like just like feeling like I miss him in a weird way. I mean, my dad's
Mm.
like an interesting guy because he doesn't really care about people, but he wasn't like particularly cruel or like he's really quiet and like
Well, he was kind of a spiritual narcissist, right?
yeah, his
Like,
wife is
yeah.
malignant, and so his wife
Okay.
would like kind of like like I was supposed to live there in 20 when I was 21. They had like the world's most abusive intervention. I had dropped out of school because my girlfriend broke up with me and I had a kind of autistic trauma meltdown. And my mom arranged this intervention. And so, they all kind of lied. But I was like, oh, my family's never been in a room before, so I'll do this. And then my dad,
So, oh my
it's like,
God.
it's so fucked up, but it's like, that's all I ever wanted was my mom and
Dude, I
dad,
can relate. Yeah.
and so they said it's all about the family. If you don't do this, your family's going to abandon you, kind of ripping open the abandonment trauma. And then the day after the intervention, my dad goes, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm going to Hawaii and I'm not coming back till you're out because this is too heavy. And so
Mm.
he comes back when I get out. I was supposed to live with him for 6 months. And after about 2 weeks, he goes, my wife doesn't want you here. I got you an apartment. Your bags are packed. We're leaving right now.
Hmm.
And
So
so
he didn't stand up to her at all. He just did
no, and this
whatever.
would
Yeah.
happen over and over again where she would kind of make the parameters for him being a good husband, for him being a bad dad. And she would
Yeah.
play, like when she came on the
Yeah.
scene, we stopped going on vacation with him.
Mm.
They would say, oh, it's because you just get drunk and throw up in the Ritz Carlton, lobby and like, one one year I slept in some girl's hotel room the night before we were supposed to leave and fell asleep and like stumbled into the lobby where like all the bags are packed. My dad's like, we have to leave right now to get the plane. He's like, you had a great night, didn't you? I'm like, yeah. He's like, your sister and your mom are so fucking mad at you. Don't even
Oh
talk
my
to them. I'm
God.
like,
You're like, man, I'm
but
just being
like,
a teenager, you
well, yeah,
know?
exactly. I'm like 16, 17. We're in
Yeah.
Mexico. You know, I was bringing acid like everywhere. So I mean, I was a handful, you know, like,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
it was the existence and to my dad's discredit, he chose her, right?
Right.
But
Right.
like without her, things are very different. Like with that restraining order I talk about,
Interesting.
she
Yeah.
wrote the complaint. He signed it. It's her handwriting, her
Oh,
experience. Because I went at her on Facebook. I want, you know, this secret son kind of popped up. My dad
yeah.
wouldn't talk. So I'm like, well, to get to him, I'll go through her. And she used to say, oh, you're born on third base and think you hit a triple. And like
Mm.
I commented on one of her posts, you fucked your way to third base and think you
Oh
hit
my
a
God.
triple.
That goes
And
over well, right?
yeah, 3 days later, a cop shows up with this restraining order, but it's her handwriting. Like, so I don't even know
Right.
if she did that and like forced, you know, I don't know, but she ended up going through with it. But it's like, I don't want
Oh,
to let
that's
him off the hook
interesting.
because he chose her. And I think you know, in his business career, the story was his partner was a raging narcissist. And
Mm.
like the employees liked my dad, but he hides behind all of this stuff,
Yeah.
right? And like, you know, their
Yeah.
accountant goes to prison for embezzlement because he says, oh, like, you know, John and Wesley, my dad promised me all this money and you know, like didn't pay me.
Wow.
And you know,
I mean, do you think it's interesting you said that you're kind of in this phase of where you're starting to idolize him or, think of him in that way. And I've had that. My mom was a malignant narcissist, but
yeah,
it's like these people are so complex, just like as we
right.
become so complex. But, my mom was, as I hear you talk about your dad, my mom was so incredibly charming.
Mhm.
Like people loved her. And she was started as a nurse and became a lawyer, but she was an incredibly generous, giving human
Mhm.
being, like helping people and that stuff was all very real.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but then there was this other part, and it's like I've found myself I don't know if I'd say idolizing her, but kind of like really being able to see the the different parts of her
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
feeling like that part of her that was so generous and so kind and so empathic was more of like the real part of her that before
Yeah.
she went through the trauma she went through and I believe it was real and I believe like I have actually found myself missing
Yeah,
that
yeah.
part of it,
My
which is
dad
such
gave
a
me
weird
hundreds
feeling.
of thousands of dollars. Like there
Yeah.
was a
Wow.
codependent relationship,
Yeah.
and I've seen him wanting to be a good dad, but he can't do it. And so what he
Right.
misses is that he created this dependency that he's so judgmental of.
Mm.
And that what I needed wasn't money, it was a dad, right? I mean, even in these
Right.
restraining order complaints, it's like all Chris wants is money. It's such an abusive position.
Mm.
But there are these like when I see myself, I see him. When I talk, I hear him now. Like I'm starting to look more and more like him. Who I am
Interesting.
is a product of wanting to know him, right? And not
Right.
realizing this yoga stuff and meditation stuff was just a mask he wore. But also, I like you with your mom. I also think it's real. Like I
Yeah.
think there's like
Absolutely.
it's like Darth Vader. Like there is like I went through this really intense period when I was really kind of, you know, maybe a year or two sober and really started. I went off my meds and I said, you know what, I'm gonna just I have to sit with whatever is going on here. And it got really
Mm.
scary because I was like cutting myself and self-harming.
Mm.
And I realized it was like, will somebody look at me? Will somebody care about me? And
Right.
so he said, can I come down and help you? And I said, yeah, but like, can you help me in the way that I need help, right?
Mm.
Like we've been down this road. And so he says, yes. And he comes down and I pour my heart out with all this new understanding of trauma. I mean, he had given me The Body Keeps the Score. He gave that book to me,
Oh
you
wow.
know, but then discounted that trauma was my story. And he looked at me after pouring my heart out for an hour or two and he said, you know, I just think you should get a job. And
Oh
like
fuck.
I said, and I said, where? And he goes, Foxconn, which was this Chinese company that makes iPhones that was on the front cover of the newspaper every
Of
day
abusing
because they
people.
totally, they bamboozled our governor into something. And I said, did you just take like
Oh
the one
God.
company on the front page of but I could see in his eyes, like he wanted to be a good dad, but he could, that's what I mean when they can't see outside their own perspective.
Yeah.
To him, perspective, I cost him money. The fact that he gives me money upsets his wife. And so from his perspective, all my problems would be solved if I just had a job. Now, did I need a job? Sure.
Right. But
I mean,
that's not
it,
the
it,
that's not the
it,
answer to
yeah,
you
I
like
mean, is it totally
expressing
inaccurate?
all of
No,
that.
but he also like wouldn't give me a job. Like he expressly forbid me other than interning with him from a career in the music business, which,
Right.
his label, he's like, well, it wasn't a family business. Yeah, okay. Well, the company shut down. Yeah, okay, but it's still run out of Blue Note Records. He,
Yeah.
like
Could have been.
he could have he could have very easily provided a pathway. In the intervention, my stepmom said like, oh, you think your dad's going to give you some high paying job in the music business? And that's all she said. And I'm thinking like, where
Mm,
the fuck isn't this about my drugs and alcohol?
yeah.
Right? Like, but
Yeah. Sounds like she was
th-
projecting quite a bit there.
she was projecting. But
Yeah.
this is the thing. It's like, this is the difference for me between like experiencing these people in a romantic relationship where they're essentially replaceable. You can find another girlfriend, find another wife, husband, boyfriend, and looking up that as parents, because we see the limitations for real, right? This is why
Right.
I kind of push back on this idea that they do this stuff on purpose, because I think when we say they do it on purpose, we're almost like ill defining what narcissistic abuse is, because we're kind of like framing it through the lens of intentional psychological abuse.
Well, it presumes an awareness that doesn't exist, right? I
It
mean,
doesn't exist. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like when we see them as parents, I mean, did my dad intentionally say, I want you to get I think you should get a job to hurt me? No, it was the limitations of how he could relate to other people and
Yeah.
how he could perceive like problems other than through the lens of how it directly affects him. And that's
Yeah.
the tragedy. I mean, if my dad, it's like, if the one things could have been different, it would have, he could have been a great dad. But like he's a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher that didn't teach his kids yoga,
Yeah.
surfer, windsurfer, skateboarder, didn't teach his kids any of that stuff. Record company executive didn't offer he just
Yeah.
hoarded his
Could have been a
life.
pretty fucking incredible
Well,
experience
you talk
for
about
a
music. My
kid.
dad would get me tickets to any concert ever. I remember we went and he didn't really go much after my wife or his wife showed up. But like I was about
Mm.
14, he took us to see U2, the Zoo TV tour,
Oh, wow.
and Public Enemy opened for them. I saw Public
Oh,
Enemy in
shit.
1992 as a 14-year-old. And to my
Oh,
credit, I turned
man.
to my dad after Public Enemy was over and I go, we can go now.
Yeah. That was enough.
U2
I'm
was
good.
great, but it was like, yeah, it was kind of a joke.
Oh,
But yeah,
man. Yeah.
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 But to me, this is part of the healing, though. It is like we get there is this like hoarding of our own of the misery. Like we want so badly to be seen in the trauma, but eventually the trauma will either consume us or will start to flesh out that the
Yeah.
experience was complex and the experience had all of these different emotional components to it. And only through that kind of acceptance of the whole picture and the acknowledgement that, yeah, you know what? I've spent 5 years talking shit about this guy in a certain way online. I mean, I actually told him in an email what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to make you famous
Internet famous.
as an archetype for a narcissistic abuser. I said that to him in
Yeah.
an
Well,
email.
I
Um,
mean, that you pouring your heart out in that moment and him saying get a job is like such a boundary violation and misattunement of your
yeah,
humanity,
yeah,
so yeah, that's
yeah.
a valid response, like fuck you, dude, I'm gonna.
Well, and then the restraining order was like
Yeah, that's a whole other level.
so profoundly traumatic for me that I didn't even realize in real time. I was at a point where I walked in there, felt nothing. I don't know how I did that, but now, it's
I mean, that's
it's
such a deep abandonment.
yeah.
It's like
But
I can't.
part of it, and I have the restraining order complaint. I can't look at it, but part of it gave me clarity in a certain way. They
Yeah.
think they were seeing me, but they were seeing a distorted version of me. They were seeing this
Right.
anger that had to come out, but I saw them, and I realized, like in that moment of get a job, it was like this. I saw in his eyes, like I saw care and concern and this desire to like be a dad. And then what came out of his mouth was just such a microcosm for everything that's wrong with his understanding of, for all of his meditation. I mean, he meditates to shut the world out, not to kind
Mm.
of, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I
mean,
don't think I think a lot of people sometimes think that, and maybe it's true that there's no, these kind of narcissistic personalities, like um there's no consequence. But I don't necessarily believe that. I mean, I saw consequence in my mother. I
uh-huh.
saw pain and suffering, and I saw confusion, and maybe it reaches a point where that filters away, and it's not there anymore, and all that's left is kind of the pathology. But I don't know. Do you think your father felt consequence of his behavior, or the lack of relationship, and
I
the
think on
way?
some level of his consciousness he does. I don't think he consciously lets that in. I think that
Yeah,
he would say he's mastered his mind and his emotions, but I
right. Well,
think
yeah,
he's
he's got that
mastered the
great
ability to
spiritual
like he's mastered the ability to kind of just not
block it
think
out.
about things that displease him, to live in his
Yeah,
own fantasy world. I mean, I've told the story before. He's got like a pretty big house, and so his meditation room is at the top of the stairs, and it's an all glass wall with a door,
yeah.
right?
I remember you saying that. I
And he
think
would
about
say,
that. Just
"Don't
like,
bother
holy
me when I'm
shit.
meditating." But like, why don't you put your fucking meditation room in the
Yeah.
basement, man? Like, you
It's like
can't
make
help
a
but
glass
bother him.
cube out in the yard and get mad when people look at you.
But it's like
It's
such
like,
a profound misunderstanding of meditation. You don't meditate to control the external
yeah.
surroundings. You meditate to not be bothered by to kind of accept, at least as I see it, and meditation is many things for many people, but as I see it, we meditate to kind of accept the complexity and the chaos and live quietly amongst it
Hmm.
without kind of trying to control or trying to kind of pretend it's not there. But to me, meditation is about connection, not disconnection.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Especially
think a lot
connection to
about,
self, right? I mean,
yeah, connection to self, to kind of sit. I mean, my interpretation of the story of the Buddha kind of achieving enlightenment under the Bodhi tree is that like he came at this time where there was an influx, or a turning point in human history where we are now grouping in small villages and tribes and all these things. And so instead of surviving the external world, we're now surviving the internal world. That our
mhm,
mind and our nervous system that had been conditioned through the thousands and thousands of years of evolution no longer had the same needs. And so to
right.
quietly sit and know your internal experience, to quiet your monkey mind, was to survive in a different type of way that resonates for a reason to this day. I mean, meditation in a
Yeah.
certain way is prayer, right? I mean,
Mhm.
prayer is meditation, meditation is prayer. These things are, you know, different wrapping paper on the same thing in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And it's about this, whether you identify prayer with like some sort of external deity, it's you're talking to yourself, right? I mean, you're sitting with yourself, and so you can personify it externally. But it to me, it's the same idea that it's curating or cultivating a healthy inner life, because that's the crux of mental health in a lot of ways, is to calm this storm that goes on because we have the power of awareness and thought.
Yeah. I mean, that feels really current right now
Yeah.
with our society, and the lack of ability to sit in the discomfort, is such a motivator for people to get out into this external world. I mean, you look at the things that especially young men are being exposed to. It's just constant, um, from sports gambling to porn to, the red pill stuff. It's just like, it's all this external
It's You nailed it
escape.
though. It's the avoidance of discomfort.
Yeah.
The growth is in the discomfort, right?
Yeah.
The life is in the discomfort in a lot of ways. And so the dissociative mechanisms we're offered now are infinite.
They're
I
insane.
mean,
Yeah. They're so
it's insane. I
powerful.
mean, full disclosure, I've bet a little bit on the World Cup, and
Yeah. I mean, it's
I
like,
can feel it. Like,
yeah. I mean, I went through rehab when I was 17. Similar,
yeah,
like your
yeah.
intervention made me laugh because I should have known something was up when my mom and my dad were in the same car together
That's
driving
the
me
same thing.
somewhere.
My dad and my
I was
uncle
like,
on my mom's
I
side
was
were in
like,
my dad's car. I'm like, what the
yeah,
fuck are you two
I
doing
was
together?
too whacked out to like
Yeah,
pick up on the biggest clue ever. But
yeah.
I ended up staying sober from
Yeah.
that point. And, years, decades later, you
That's
know,
insane. You managed to do that from 17 on?
yeah,
Kudos.
I
Yeah.
was the only kid in the whole place that stayed
Yeah.
sober. And
That's awesome.
because years later, I would see kind of some of the guys that were counselors in that facility that I became friends with. Later, they were older than me, but I got kicked out, and I tried to like blow the whole thing up, but eventually I just kind of surrendered, and was like,
Mhm.
man, this is not going well. And I had one counselor who told me, there are certain rules you couldn't break. It was an inpatient facility. It was like, they were like, oh, you couldn't have sex with anybody. That wasn't on the table. You couldn't, just general non-compliance. I'm like, well, that takes too long to just not do the stuff. And the other one was violence. So I just went in my room and attacked my roommate, this kid.
Mhm.
I didn't even know this kid, but I was like, I'm getting out of here. And,
Yeah.
and they were like, I didn't know that it was like you get kicked out for 10 days and then you come back. I wasn't smart enough to put
Yeah.
that whole thing together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
17. It's like they're
Yeah.
not going to be like, okay, man, well, have a good life. At least you tried, kind of thing. But my counselor at the time said, you just keep inviting more and more people into your life to make decisions for you. You're
Yeah.
inviting all the people here. Pretty soon you're going to be inviting the police and
Yeah.
judges. And I was just like, that got me, man. I was just like, wow, that is
Yeah. Yeah.
something sunk in for me to where I just, I had to leave for 10 days and I came back and I'm just like,
Yeah.
well, what I'm doing is not working. But
Yeah.
yeah, at 17, that seems like,
That's
seems
nuts. Yeah. I mean,
unlikely,
I stayed
to
sober
work.
for maybe like a year, and then I spent the rest of my 20s and my full 30s like on a bar stool,
Yeah.
putting stuff in my nose and, all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff.
It could have easily done that as well for
But I
me,
ended up loving rehab both times, actually. I mean, I'm one of these. I realized it was like this desire to be loved, and like when I went to
Yeah.
rehab the second time when I was 38, no 39, um, outside of Portland, I ended up staying for 3 months because
Yeah,
I
that's what I
and
did.
like
I was in for
I,
3 months too.
yeah, and I didn't want to go, and I realized my family didn't show up, for
Hmm.
decades telling me I was sick and this and that. They didn't show up, but like what I realized is like I was learning to be loved by all of the people there. That like to me,
Mm.
like rehab was this beautiful spot where you'd have like the 17-year-old street kid sitting next to the 65-year-old high-powered lawyer, and you're on this
Right.
even playing field that doesn't really exist anywhere else in real life.
No,
That like they
it's very level set.
there was
Yeah.
this like and there are obviously problematic people, and there, I didn't get along with a lot of the counselors. I had
Yeah.
my issues with my own rebellious nature, but I realized it was about like learning connect. I really think addiction is rooted in connection or lack of
Yeah. Oh, I
connection,
agree. Yeah.
and that like I, I, what's hard is people start dying. People
Right.
die, but like I think back on those 3 months as some of the most beautiful months of my life, even though it was
Mm.
like this really like I checked myself in. I flew out there by myself. Like I got there
Uh,
and they're like, "You're not drunk. You made it through an airport." And I'm like,
yeah.
"I'm not drunk." I'm like, "I'm going to rehab." They're like, people are like shooting up in the parking lot, And then I kind of realized like, oh, this might be a little, like I think for me, like it ended up the addiction stuff was the doorway through which to deal with the trauma, right? That
That's
it
the way
was
I
like
see it. Yeah. I mean, it's like
it
I really saw the addiction as a symptom
yeah,
of the
yeah.
trauma. And but you're right that I had a similar experience, not in rehab, but after being sober, like the friendships and the bonds that I made, I learned how to have an actual relationship.
Mhm.
I didn't know before then how to relate to another human being. It was
Yeah,
like
yeah,
my whole relational field was like, you're either a threat, and I know how to deal with that, or you're not a threat, and I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to keep you in this category that like you could become a threat at any time. That was the
yeah,
extent of
yeah,
my
yeah,
relational experience.
yeah.
And I remember, I had the sponsor, went to AA meetings and stuff for a long time. But my first sponsor was the person that taught me how to have an interaction, like a human friendship.
Yeah.
and from there I developed other human friendships, and I have friends that I've since that time I talk to almost every day still via
Beautiful.
text or
Yeah.
whatever, and it's not about sobriety in this. It's about like we have this undeniable bond that I don't have in other places
It's
of my
authentic.
life.
It's connected
Yeah,
through the authentic self, right? That
yeah,
it's like, I mean, for me, I was more like a slightly less damaging version of JD Vance, where I think I was just
hmm,
adapting to, I
of
was in
course,
this room, this version of me would come out. I was in that room, this version of me would come out, and like,
yeah,
allowing ourselves the process of rehab, which is essentially tearing us down a little bit, like tearing
yeah,
us to this core, but then being able to connect from that core, even when it's a core wound. I mean, it does. Like I said, like a lot of my friends have died actually. Like
yeah,
it's been really sad. Like, because like not noticing, oh, I haven't heard from this guy in a while, and then realizing, oh shit.
yeah,
Um, and that's been tough, but also, I think I really thought I think I'd be dead if I didn't go to rehab when I
oh,
did.
there's
I
no
really
question.
believe that, like, I
Dude,
mean, I
I
had
wouldn't have
gotten
made it to 20.
no,
No,
I never thought I would make it to 40, but I mean, even back then, like I had gotten some fentanyl on accident one time,
yeah,
and like my nasal cavity closed and I had to go to the ER, and like,
mm,
um, but like dealing with our own mortality, and seeing people, and how kind of fragile we are as human beings, to me in my best days creates that sense of gratitude, just for whatever, even when life sucks, even when we're living in this
yeah,
fucking dystopian like nightmare. um
yeah,
there's still this sense of like gratitude, like not in a toxically positive way, but just an acknowledgement that like life is wonderful, and it's a struggle, but we're alive, right? And
yeah,
like there's something inherently amazing about that, even given all of the complexity of the modern world that we're kind of like stumbling through.
yeah. I mean, I used to hear people mention something like, "Oh, the joy of life," and I'd be like, there's no
Yeah.
joy to this, but
Yeah.
there's something about being an adult and going through this kind of process of becoming aware of my trauma and my dysfunction, and then navigating through that to the point where, oh wow, I know what they mean now when they
Hmm.
say that, and it can be the simplest thing that's just in my environment, my dog,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
comment from somebody, and I never understood what that was, and I even when I was in the middle of this process, I remember this woman, Sarah Baldwin, who I learned a lot of stuff from about this. She kind of went through this whole healing process, and she described one time, like she said, no one can. There are no words for trauma. Like you can
Mhm.
never convey to someone with words. But she said there are also no words for the first time that you see this level of beauty in this new way from this new place that you've
Mhm.
discovered. And like I get chills just saying it because
Yeah.
it's so true. It's
Yeah.
so true.
I always say truth is an experience, not an expression, and that
Mm,
like I've talked about that for a while, that we don't have the right language around our internal experience to properly convey it, because like
yeah.
we have these words that have kind of attempted to compartmentalize or reduce the human experience to these singular self states.
Right.
I am happy, I am sad, I am
I'm
angry.
angry. Yeah.
When consciousness is like all things at once, where it's never one thing. It's like this mosaic that we're looking at, and our conditioning kind of forces us to focus on whatever we're focusing on. But meanwhile, there's this entire other picture that we're experiencing, that we're kind of, that gets lost in translation. We're lost in kind of, I think of the trauma like a tunnel. And I honestly think, like, this is kind of controversial, but like, I think trauma is like a human experience, and that like
Mm,
we all have it in a certain way. It's just whether, when we're talking about Elon Musk and like consumption and hoarding, like that's a trauma response in a certain
for
way,
sure.
right? And so I think like when we start to kind of acknowledge the scope of what we're experiencing, it can liberate us from like the belief. I mean, this kind of jives with like IFS a little bit, but
Yeah,
it liberates
that's
us
what it
from the
sounds.
belief that we're one thing, right? Where it's like,
Right.
why I love IFS is it's put structure to this where it's like I have this angry part and it's fucking angry. And when it kind
Yeah.
of takes over, it's rage. But that's not me. That's one part of me, right? I
Yeah.
also have this tender part and this kind of curious part and and that.
Yeah. It all exists. It's like acknowledging the complexity
Yeah.
of that, and sometimes the parts are at war with one another and self is nowhere to
Yeah.
be seen,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, you mentioned something
Yeah.
earlier about being like JD Vance, and it's like I can totally relate to that because I could, my MO was like I can fucking be anything, anywhere,
Hmm. Hmm.
anytime to make sure this situation stays safe for me, whatever
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
required. That was
Yeah.
my survival technique. And I was talking to somebody yesterday about like who's kind of going through this, like, and he asked me the question like, how do you know what you need? And man, that is not easy for me. Especially in the beginning, people would say, "Hey, it could be simplest thing like, do you want to go see this movie or do you want to have this?" I was the most agreeable dude on the
Yeah.
planet.
Same.
I,
Yeah.
I could do anything, like whatever you want to do. Like there was zero preference, genuinely, and realizing that was kind of eye opening to me as I started to develop this sense of self. Oh, I'm actually like it's kind of safe to have a preference
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
actually say, hey, I would actually prefer this. And then my whole nervous system would just shut down as soon as
Yeah.
those words came
Yeah.
out of my mouth. So the process of identifying needs is so interesting to me. And I mean, what was that like for you? Are you still in that process?
I thought I was out of it for a while, and I think my career on social media has kind of like reawakened it a little bit with this
Mm,
awareness of the audience. But what I've kind of come to is that, when we think of like what the conditioning is for a narcissistic parent, how that affects us, and we try to reduce it to like first principle, it's compulsive self-abandonment, which is what you're describing, right? Which
absolutely,
is
man.
which is just we want
Oh,
connection and
yeah.
we'll just abandon ourselves to get it. And so sometimes it's harmless, like, do you want to see this movie or that movie? I don't fucking care,
Yeah.
and it's okay to sometimes not have an opinion. But when it's like when it came time for me to go to college, I couldn't fit I still struggle with like resumes. I couldn't figure out how I couldn't like fill out my mom filled out all my college applications. She decided I couldn't stay in the state. She decided I'd go to the University of Iowa. And I just I had literally no thoughts about it, like none. I
Yeah.
just did it,
Yeah.
and like um I kind of regret it a little bit because I think I was drowning in trauma and I needed a little time off, like that I
Yeah.
wasn't ready to go to school. Um, but now I think, I'm in a relationship, and it's been, maybe a year and a half, a little over a year and a half.
Mm,
And I realize, I haven't had a lot of long relationships in my life. And I realize in this relationship how easy it is to kind of not say the thing that we want to say. And
yeah.
my girlfriend struggles with this as well. And so we've been working on saying the things, of not. I think I've gotten a lot better at it, but I still think, I think of like trauma brain as like this one track mind, and then like the healing brain is this like other tracked mind. And it's like very easy a lot of times to jump tracks and find
Yeah. Oh,
yourself
yeah. Oh,
back in
yeah.
these kind of mental patterns. Um,
Where
but
you're switching neural pathways, right? I mean, you're just
yeah,
the
yeah,
trauma
yeah.
brain is well worn.
But I also, I was talking about this with somebody today, like our strengths and our weaknesses are a lot of times the same thing. And
Mhm.
so it's like, it's like seeing like this ability to kind of like blend in a little bit, could be viewed as something more positive, which is I can find the connective tissues with all sorts of different people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah. It's a
necessarily
skill.
inauthentic. But it's like, are you doing it intentionally or compulsively, where it's health or illness? And so
Yeah.
I've learned like with these things to really like give up on the idea that it's this steady like uphill climb and it's and it's just more like all chaotic.
It's like a
um
squiggly piece of string,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and really just like explore those parts of me with kind of curiosity and compassion and not so much judgment, but still trying to cultivate core
hmm
self.
You bring up, compassion and curiosity. I mean, that's like when you were talking about your relationship, safety is paramount to
Yeah,
have, to be able to explore that stuff, and compassion for myself and all of my flaws and my parts and my mistakes. And, I have a lot of stuff to do that I need to do, and I'm laying in bed and I'm in a state of freeze and I can't move. And like, just in those moments, being able to just find that compassion is so freaking powerful, to not
there was
shame
a great
myself.
yeah, yeah. There's a great poem by this guy David White, and there's a part in it. I shared it on TikTok a couple years ago, but he says, what do you do when you find yourself lost in the forest? You stop and you look
Mhm.
around and you
Yeah.
listen, and it's
Yeah.
like we're all kind of lost in the forest, especially when trauma. I think of trauma like a tunnel, and when I'm in the trauma tunnel, what do I do? Right? Do I pretend I can escape? No. Do I kind of like run as fast as I can towards the exit? No, I stop and I try to get above it a little bit and not out of it, but recognize like, okay, I'm having a triggered moment here and I have to kind of move through it. But I can kind of see that like I don't have to kind of like let it snowball,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
so it sometimes the change we're looking for is actually acceptance, right? That
hmm
it's not a changing of the state, the self state, or a changing of anything other than how we're meeting ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
like I think people sometimes associate acceptance with surrender, but it's anything but. It's acceptance as a means to transform, right? That we can't
Yeah.
really like change from a posture that we're not acknowledging and accepting. And so it's like learning learning to relate differently to the trauma has been really
Mm.
helpful.
Yeah, and I think finding that self-acceptance too is like that allows you to extend that to someone, to the other,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
hey, y- it, developing that ability to withstand that discomfort in myself
yeah,
allows me to be able to withstand that discomfort in someone else, and then I
yeah,
become useful. It's like, instead of
yeah,
like, oh man, this is threatening, I got to get away from this or shut this down
yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
I mean, that's
It's our
so much.
relationship to ourself that will dictate our relationship to others, that they're in constant dialogue, that how we show up for ourselves, how we accept ourselves, like you just said, is how we accept other people. If we're annoyed with ourselves, we become annoyed with other people. If and
Yeah,
so it's it
it's
it
kind of like the conservative Christians who are railing against
yeah,
homophobia, and all this stuff is all this internal,
yeah,
whether they're like gay and repressed or not, they have something going on internally that's forcing them to externalize it in this way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the repression of self leads us to punish the things in others that we want to punish ourselves for. And I mean, I think I think there is a lot. I mean, Grinder crashes at the RNC. That tells you
It's
how
not a
many.
coincidence, man.
It's not. It's and it's not. It's about like living authentically. I'm reading this really long new biography of James Baldwin, and it's so fascinating
Mm,
because I've resonated so much with his work through this process of understanding narcissistic abuse, because the narcissistic abuse is essentially oppression. And so his kind of
yeah,
status as a black man and as a gay man and the repression of these things, he speaks so eloquently, about like identifying that racism is actually about the racist, not the object of the racism,
right.
right? And that why do people need the N word, for instance? Why do white people need this? Why have they created whiteness? And it speaks to not just that issue, but to all issues of repression and of relationship to self. Because they hate themselves, they have to personify that hate externally into a receptacle. And so
Yeah,
it could be nationalism, racism, religious supremacy, and any of these kind
Misogyny,
of,
yeah, all of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
anything. It's about what they're repressing in themselves, and what they can't accept about themselves. And it's, it to me, like, it's threatening the world in a sense. I've
yeah,
been saying for years
totally,
that,
man. I mean,
like,
Stephen Miller's such a great example of that. How he
oh
gets on
yeah,
TV
yeah,
and rails against James Talarico, and he literally sounds like the gayest guy you've ever listened to. I'm like, dude, and then
yeah.
talks about it's just like so unbelievably
The
transparent. Like,
world individually and collectively is craving authenticity. We were just talking
yeah,
about self-abandonment within kind of narcissistic family structures, but we live in a culture that demands self-abandonment for work, basically.
it
Very few
does. Yeah,
people have a job where they can go and be themselves. They put on a costume in their work clothes, they put on a
yep,
work mask in their work persona, they check their emotions at the door if they want to be successful.
yeah. You're not
And
allowed to be
there's this,
sensitive. You're not allowed to
right,
be
right.
creative.
There's this
Yeah,
compelled self-abandonment in concentric circles of our lives, right? I
yeah,
mean, in
yeah. And
order
it's
to get what we
expected.
want in our family unit, in work, and it's connecting to a broken society by breaking connection to self, and it is, to me, the mental health issue of our time.
Yeah,
That kind of drives a lot of all this other stuff, which is just being able to live authentically, being able to kind of express who we are, or even
yeah,
know who we are. So much, like, I don't think these people are, I don't, I mean, some of it is conscious, but a lot of this is just working on that in between space between our conscious, unconscious, and conscious minds,
yeah.
and like,
I agree. I think you're right
um,
that a lot of it's just not there's no awareness of it, but it spews
I've been
out.
thinking more and more, yeah, about like in the concept of intelligence in our culture and how it's completely broken. That, like, we
Mm.
think of intelligence, going back to the billionaires, like that because they've acquired so much money, they must be inherently intelligent people. And they are
Right.
in these
I
one
made a note about
sectors.
that to talk to you about that. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, well, they
Yeah.
want, like Elon Musk. I made a post saying he doesn't help anybody, and people were pushing back. And so I looked into the reality of where his charity goes, and it all goes to his own foundation that struggles to meet the 5% minimum of what they're supposed to give away. So,
Right.
but a lot of what he wants to do is build STEM only schools. They literally want to do away with humanities. And to me, that's where their intelligence blind spot comes, is they literally don't know what it means to be human. They're
Yeah.
all engineer brains.
Yeah.
And
They
in
don't
those
value
engineer
that.
brains, that's how you get the Nazis, basically. Well,
Yeah.
you subtract humanity, and you just have this cold, efficient belief. You can see where it's going. I mean, like, all of this, like, going to Mars and all of this bullshit they're
It's
talking about
fucking
has
wild,
an
isn't it?
obvious blind spot of, like, they're willing to kill half the planet. They don't care. When they talk about people, they're talking about white people like them.
I was watching some of your recent videos about that, and just like this idea that we can colonize Mars and create it's so bizarre to me. We have it right here. We already have what is way better than what would ever exist on Mars. We're just destroying it. So why don't we just
The,
stop destroying it? Like
Well, I think it relates to what we were just talking about, is this almost unconscious understanding that they're repressing, that what they're doing is destroying the world. And
mm,
so they create this shiny object. We're not actually destroying the world. We're saving the species. I've had people say that in
yeah,
my comment
exactly.
section. It's like
The world
saving the
doesn't.
species.
Yeah,
Do you know what it would take? Like, they can't terraform Mars. You can't live on the surface. All of the soil is toxic.
can
The
you
radiation,
imagine?
there's no atmosphere. Like you'd have to have rockets going back and forth for like 30 years nonstop to get the amount of people that it doesn't pass, like, even basic
It's not
scientific
even. Yeah, it's
understanding.
not even like the most basic logic. Like
But like in this book, they said Lex Friedman read this quote from Carl Sagan to Elon Musk about how this is impossible. He goes, well, he's wrong, Mars. But it's like this. I mean, Musk is hilarious because, like,
yeah,
like, he's named after a character in a book written by Nazi scientist Werner von Braun, who was scooped up in Operation Paperclip and helped us get to the moon. But it's a book about a colony living under the surface of Mars, whose leader is named the Elon. That's who his father says he's named after. So this is all rooted in his trauma, right? Of
oh
just
my god,
wanting.
man.
It's all nuts, but it's like, yeah. I heard Mark Andreessen say once, well, we need AI so we can, reverse climate change. Or you could just stop burning fossil fuels. But they
Yeah,
literally want to maximize energy consumption. Like,
yeah,
they look at, like, the success of the species through individual energy consumption, and they want to
Yeah.
exponentially
Yeah.
increase it.
Yeah. So
It's so weird.
they're gonna just save the planet by building more data centers, hoping that
Yeah.
AI is gonna save the planet.
I
Right.
said
It's
it.
like,
It's like that Vietnam guy who says we got to burn the village to save the village. That it's
right.
literally the same logic. It's
Yeah.
this ideological, it's this slavish devotion to ideology at the expense of common sense reality in human life, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a cult, right?
It is a cult.
And yeah. So it's just wild, man. I actually saw Mark Cuban say once, he's like, all of these billionaires, including myself, he's like, we couldn't do this again. Like, we just got lucky. We were just in the right place at the right time, in the right spaces. And he left off, all or slightly narcissistic,
Yeah.
they just got lucky, that they
Yeah.
couldn't do it again. Like, it wasn't some big, massive intelligence that they have or
Oh,
superhuman ability. Elon Musk
right
is
place,
not.
right time.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I
And
think the internet is responsible for all of the destabilization we're experiencing. And
absolutely.
so one component of that is the wealth it created, and how it created wealth in the hands of the few, right? It used to be
Yeah,
like Ford would employ like millions of people or whatever.
that's right.
And so now you have Netscape, which made Andreessen trillions of dollars, but employed, hundreds of people, if even that.
Right.
And then you have the way that the information moved around, and it created this kind of perfect tool for psychological warfare and cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
It's we don't really talk enough about how we're living in this destabilized world because of technology. I mean, I used to talk about this a lot more of like we hadn't really dealt with how television changed reality, right?
Mm.
Like how our information systems change the scope and the nature of our individual realities. And so we hadn't kind of dealt with the way television, like for instance, Vietnam, right? A lot of the pushback to the Vietnam War was because we were, we weren't, we were young, but like we're not alive, but they were seeing images of war and
Every
what that
night.
was like, right? And you
Every
can see
night. Yeah.
a parallel to that with what's happening in Gaza. It's just exponentially more, where we're seeing in real time what this looks like. And so, you have the internet that basically like did away with third spaces because it's the ultimate third space. Wherever you are, you are in your phone. We're
Yeah.
never really alone. Information is like we're getting assaulted by information, and now they're going to unleash AI, and it's
Yeah.
just
Now you
boom,
don't know
boom,
what's
boom, boom,
real.
boom.
You
Now you
can't
don't know
tell
what's
what's
real.
real.
I mean,
Yeah.
do you ever wonder like why they don't like if they wanted AI to not be a tool of distortion and disorder, they would legislate that like AI content has to have some sort of watermark on it. To me, that
Right.
seems like
It
a
seems pretty
no-brainer,
obvious,
unless you're trying to destroy reality
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah.
'Cause
It seems
I get burned by
pretty
it,
obvious. I do too. Yeah. It's like, oh man, I'm a, my career was photography, and it's
Yeah,
been, more or less destroyed by
yeah,
AI. And so I'm always kind of hypersensitive to it, but
yeah,
I do get fooled by it. It's like,
yeah.
oh shit, your brain's in the right spot, and it just like,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
lands,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Reality. I mean, it's. We're living in really kind of dynamic times. I mean,
yeah, we are, man.
for better or worse, mostly worse, it seems. But I also try not to like. I mean, my mind is doom and gloom. Like I tend
Yeah,
to, but I try to like tell myself we really don't know. We really
that's
don't
right.
know what's going to
We
happen.
don't. And I kind of do that as well. And I also think to myself, like, you know, personally in my life, there have been plenty of times when, well, this kind of has to get a little bit worse before it's going to get better.
Mhm.
I think that's true in society and
Yeah.
nations, and and we're in that state. We're in that this is going to have to get worse part before it
Yeah.
gets better. We just don't know how
I
long it's going to last or where
I
it's going
think
to
about
go.
that a lot with Trump and like what it would have been like if he hadn't won, and
Yeah,
like in a certain way that like it had to happen. Like it,
we'd have
I
just
don't
kicked
know
the
this,
can
but
down the
like I
road,
think
right?
about that like if this kind of thing is going to get like out of our culture because it's a cultural problem
Yeah,
first, I think, and a political problem second, then it had to be if he had lost, it would just be the same old like blaming Democrats,
Yeah, we'd still be in it.
you know, and again, like, I wish he hadn't have won, but like, I do think like in some ways it had to be functionally exposed. It's just a matter, you know, to me, it's a question of, is it too late or not? You know,
Right. Yeah, and the, where are we in terms of technology and
yeah,
wealth
yeah,
gap and all that stuff and voting rights and these things. But yeah, I think you're right. I think about that too. Like, oh, if he hadn't won or if he hadn't come along, I think we would have just been postponing this
yeah,
until another time.
yeah.
And, are we going to rise to rise to the challenge and find a way to fix it? I don't know.
I don't know
Um,
either.
but it's like, I mean, I was watching this Netflix documentary on Thomas Jefferson recently, which was kind of interesting to me. Just more from, I mean, I was not raised with some fantasy of how this country was founded, and I was taught, you know, I mean, my mom sat me down and made me watch, Roots every year just to remind me of what happened in this country, and my stepfather was a professor of ethnic studies at a university, small
Interesting.
university. So,
Yeah.
these my household was not subscribing to,
You grew up
the
in one of those woke households.
yeah, I guess
No,
so.
I mean, I like mine
Yeah,
wasn't quite like that, but like having my dad Swami, my mother had spent time on
yeah, you
Pine
had,
Ridge Reservation, you
yeah,
know, that like we
yeah,
centered this Indian guy. And so
yeah.
I'm actually thankful for that, even though the Swami
Oh,
was a really bad guy and like my
yeah,
dad's who he was, but it's like
yeah. I'm grateful for that exposure and just like,
yeah.
open my eyes, and my stepfather was
What
involved
was
with
the
a lot of these
Jefferson
trials.
vibe? I mean, what was the
So
vibe
there's a
with them?
there's a
Or if you remember?
documentary on Netflix. Just I think it's just called Thomas Jefferson, but they kind of don't candy coat a lot of
Yes.
things in there. And he's literally at the desk writing, all men are created equal, while coming in the room to his enslaved servant to pour his tea or whatever. And it just kind of highlights how this the hypocrisy and where we are now. When I fast forward to now, and we have a political administration that's trying to strip away not just the voting rights of Black Americans, but their actual citizenship. It's just like,
Yeah.
so we haven't dealt with it.
No,
And
that is the truth, though. It's like I think that's the hardest thing, specifically for liberals, to kind of do away with, is this, you know, American exceptionalist mythology that infects both sides, and understand when we actually appeal to the founders, you're playing by the Republicans' game. You
that's
know
right.
that like to be able to step outside of that indoctrination and conditioning and truly understand. I mean, Tad Sturmer is one of my favorite guys on this.
Mm.
It's talking about liberal nationalism, and nationalism to me is a form of cultural narcissism. That
Yeah.
it's this kind of grandiose false self of our national story, and that, you know, the right will say you hate America if you tell the truth, but to me, like, to truly love something, the ultimate form of love is seeing it clearly,
Yeah.
right? And
Facing it.
facing it. And because we haven't faced it, I've been saying for years, Donald Trump is the American shadow, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
he is the embodiment of the racial hierarchy, of white supremacy, of all of the kind of unspoken aspects of the American psyche, and sometimes spoken. But I tend to think of racism not just in the conscious kind of bigotry, but in the way we're conditioned to just see things and feel
Absolutely.
things
Yeah.
differently, right? And that's
Yeah.
actually where the work is anti-racism work isn't like going and talking to our Black friends and asking them how the trauma of racism has affected them. That's called compassion.
Yeah.
Anti-racism is looking inward and deconstructing some of these things. And part of that is like when they say we the people in these documents, they didn't have to say white people. It
No,
was
there
assumed,
were no other
right?
people.
Right,
You had
right,
to be a
right.
white, rich landowner. That's who the
Right,
people
right,
were.
and
You know.
when Republicans say we want to go back to the founding, and everybody appeals to like the kind of like aims of the founders, that's trash. That's bullshit. The Republicans are actually right, and we need to fight that.
Yeah.
Right, that we don't want to go back to the founding.
Yeah.
That whatever you know,
Yeah.
it's
It's an interesting documentary
yeah,
to watch for me, just from that
yeah,
lens, and also
yeah,
just looking at just the racism of our society today, and how, I mean, there are things I didn't know, like Thomas Jefferson became a, ambassador to France, and was like over in France and brought, I think, two of enslaved people with him. But in France, they had already declared, if you are enslaved, you can just literally stand up and say, I don't want to be this anymore, and you're free.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he tried to hide this from
Yeah.
his, it's just like, dude, it's such a paradox. Like, he knew
Yeah.
his own thing was wrong, but he was still like, couldn't let go of the
Well,
privilege and
he
the,
raped one of his slaves
yeah,
and kept his own children in
that's right.
bondage. I mean,
Yeah.
like, you don't, there's no like
That's,
words he could have written on paper
no,
that
that made
undo
that
that.
okay. Yeah.
That
That's just a
tells you
fact.
right there who he is, right?
That's right.
And like,
That's right.
again, this isn't to like shit on people. It's just to live in the truth.
It's reality.
I
Yeah. And
opted
it's,
for the Sitting Bull documentary instead. I watched the Sitting Bull
oh
one.
yeah, I want to watch that too.
It's pretty good.
That's far more
Yeah.
entertaining and
But
factual,
I
probably.
think it's important to like have conversations like this again. Like
Yeah.
Tad Sturmer is so. I mean, I've known him for a couple of years on TikTok, and just watching him like work and write this book and kind of deconstruct the patriot mythology and the American exceptionalist mythology, is really validating, but also really crucial. That it,
Yeah.
like, we can't heal as a culture if we continue lying to ourselves. It's this,
No.
same thing with the individual, where it's like if our ability to heal is our ability to sit with truth, to sit with our own faults, our own kind of, it's easy to kind of look at our parents or, and it's valid, right, to understand where we came from. But ultimately, the healing is about not what was done to us, but what it means for us. And how do we kind of become like whole human beings,
Yeah. And just, again, back to the discomfort of like, I'm wrong, or, oh, I can see how I'm racist in this way, or, it's like, even like my brother's getting pounded right now for being a racist and this and that around Talarico and Jasmine Crockett. And I read the comments and I'm like, I feel the sting of that, and I am deeply curious. I want to make sure I understand. And it's like that part is so important. Like, I want to understand this because I know what has happened here, and continues to happen.
But,
And when
I think racism is as much a feeling as a thought. I mean, I always kind of use the, like, you're walking down a dark road or dark street at night and a group of white kids comes towards you versus a group of black kids. White people, if they're being honest, have a different somatic experience based on that. And to me, that's where the conditioning is deconstructing why we're having different reactions based on these superficial characteristics.
Yeah. I mean, what was your first exposure to racism? Do you remember?
So I had some, I went to Catholic school, and I don't think I had a black classmate in grade school. And then when I went to high school, I played basketball, and so I made some. Actually, I had a couple black friends through my club soccer team in grade school, but that was outside of school. And I had some of my friends, and their dad was kind of famous. He was like a newscaster, and just kind of seeing the sadness almost. It wasn't like outward racism, but seeing the toll of racism, that like, I just started to sense how different it was for them, growing up where we grew up than it was for me. I don't know, like, in terms of like racial incidents, I don't really know. I just know that, and then I ended up playing on an all-state AAU team, which was actually really beautiful because it was like we had the suburban kids like me, the city kids, we had the fucking farm boys, and it was like, but everybody everybody got along. It was really like kind of special when I think back on that. But I think it was really like just I've always been a kind of like emotional person and empathetic in a certain way. And so I just remember being really curious about why there was this kind of, I interpreted this sadness. And and what that meant.
Yeah, it sounds like you felt it more than anything.
Well, because I was never like we were talking about earlier, like this chameleon type thing. So I grew up in suburban Milwaukee, and so I had friends who were like jocks. I had friends who were stoners. I go with the hunting crew, and you'd see racism, in different pockets. And
Right.
then I had my basketball friends, like my mom. I used to have but we had a program that would have some of the city kids would get bussed out to the suburban schools. And so in between school and the game, a couple of my friends would come to my house, and we'd eat and whatever, and we wait for the game. And we still laugh about this to this day. Like we got Subway, and my mom like asked one of my black friends if they wanted hot sauce on their subs, and like my mom has no idea why that's funny, but it was like the funniest thing for us to kind of like laugh.
Oh man,
But
that's
it's
funny.
like,
Yeah,
I racism is it's such a malignant cancer on our culture. Like
yeah,
I really think it is driving all of this dysfunction in a lot of ways. This kind of inability, it was like Obama gets elected and then racism is over. I heard some like right wing podcasters saying that word has lost all meaning, and it's like, no, it hasn't.
no, it was just unearthed, man.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Well, and
it's
I think
like
Obama,
how many black people were murdered by cops that you just
right,
never
right,
heard a
right.
word
I mean,
about
look
because
at
we
what's
didn't
going
have
on
cell
now.
phones and we didn't have, cameras. I mean, we only knew of Rodney King. I was just talking to my brother about this yesterday, like, because some guy happened to be in his window with this giant, one of those
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
camcorders that took an
yeah,
entire VHS tape. It's like,
yeah,
what are the chances that guy had that camera right there and he could even get it fucking exposed properly at night
yeah,
to
yeah,
capture that?
yeah.
That
I mean,
was,
the expanded awareness, it's like I think about that a lot, that like is the world really the world is changing in certain ways, but the biggest way it's changing is our awareness of everything,
yeah,
right? Because everybody's
yeah,
walking around with a camera.
that's right.
And so the scope of our awareness is basically everywhere. Like there's just one place now. It's called here,
That's
and
right.
like
Yeah,
we're existing through our phones in all these places. And I think it distorts reality as much as it illuminates it in a lot
it
of
does.
ways.
Yeah, it really does. It can go both ways, but it
Yeah.
was good talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Always
let's
nice to be with you.
let's do it again.
Yeah. I'm always down.